everyone, welcome back. We have another fun topic for you today, and it's one you've been requesting a lot. It's how to treat hyperpigmentation in dark skin tones. With us today is Dr. Alexis Stephens. She is a board-certified dermatologist at Parkland Dermatology in Florida. Hi, Dr. Stephens.
Hi, Susan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
This is a topic that comes up all the time, and I know that it can get a little bit tricky because treating hyperpigmentation in darker skin tones can be really tricky because you don't want to make it worse, right?
Exactly. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's actually the number one thing that I do in my clinic, and it is extremely tricky. There's a lot of things out there marketed for hyperpigmentation, dark spot corrections that really will worsen pigmentation in someone with a darker skin tone. So I'm really glad we're talking about this today.
Let's first address what hyperpigmentation is.
So hyperpigmentation is this big umbrella term, right? It means that you have more melanin or more pigment in a certain area of your face. So there's a certain spot on your face or a certain area of your face that's a little bit darker than the surrounding skin. This occurs because of overproduction of melanin, which is pigment. This happens in a little cell called a melanocyte, and there are a lot of different causes for overstimulation or overproduction of melanocytes. Think of it as a big umbrella term. If someone says your diagnosis is hyperpigmentation, that might not be the right provider for you because that is not a true diagnosis. There is usually a cause, a reason, and a name to the hyperpigmentation. So some of those names may be PIH or post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, meaning that the hyperpigmentation followed some type of traumatic event, whether that was acne, whether that was a mosquito bite, whether that was true induced trauma and then you had to heal with a scar and the scar had hyperpigmentation, could even be eczema or psoriasis. In dark skin patients, any kind of inflammation and irritation to the skin can lead to hyperpigmentation. So that is when you have someone who has PIH, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Then there is melasma. So this is also known as the mask of pregnancy. And melasma is usually genetic, hormonal, UV-induced, heat-induced. There's so many different components to melasma. There's also a vascular component of melasma. So it's super duper important that you actually see a provider if you do have true melasma, because this can be a very difficult condition to treat on your own. Other conditions that fall under that umbrella term of hyperpigmentation are freckles or solar lentigines, so what people call sunspots that usually are UV-induced. You can also have something called chronic actinic dermatitis. There's many different causes of hyperpigmentation.
Saying that, what is it that triggers this hyperpigmentation? Because I know some people get it and some people don't.
Right, so hyperpigmentation is triggered mostly by your genetic predisposition. So if you take a look at mom or dad and they have some hyperpigmentation on the skin, you're more prone to getting it. But that also plays a factor with UV rays, hormone development, whether you live in a really hot, warm climate like Miami, even your lifestyle choices. So if you do a lot of yoga or hot yoga, or you drink a lot of hot and spicy foods, it can all trigger melanocytes and they can all go into overproduction of producing too much pigment.
So I think what we tend to see is that darker skin tones have more hyperpigmentation, or they can be more prone to it than lighter skin tones. Why is that?
So that's a really great question. Those with darker skin tone naturally have more melanin, and melanin by itself is a bit of a fickle pigmented cell. It doesn't like to be irritated. So whether that's irritation from the sun, irritation from picking, irritation just following post-acne or trauma, it will respond with hyperpigmentation and erythema. For those who have a lot of melanin, that means they're more prone to having more hyperpigmentation because they have more melanin to begin with. Those who do not have as much melanin can still respond with hyperpigmentation. They can also respond with something called erythema. Now, the dark skin patient can also have erythema, but it is less noticeable and the hyperpigmentation is more prevalent. So that was a really good question, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't understand. We are all prone to hyperpigmentation, but the more melanin you have, the more likely you are to get it, the more likely it is to develop simply by numbers. It's a numbers game when it comes to hyperpigmentation and it's showing up on your skin.
And you mentioned something like melasma, which is something that I suffer from because I have had 2 pregnancies, so the hormones are really affecting it. But I have really noticed, when I used to go to, like hot yoga, like you said, or even to my cycling classes, that my hyperpigmentation, my melasma would get worse. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think people get really confused when I tell them that you just don't want to get too hot.
Right, so heat, or even like thermal light heat, all can generate overproduction of melanin. There's all of these different triggers, and a lot of evidence has shown that heat is one of them, whether it's heat from like sitting in a sauna or a hot yoga class, or if you're just always cooking over a stove that's high with heat, it just makes your melanin unhappy and it overproduces.
All right, so there are kind of 2 options for treating hyperpigmentation. One is treating hyperpigmentation at home. What would be some of the ways to do that?
So ways you could treat hyperpigmentation at home are by using gentle exfoliants. And the reason I'm saying gentle is because if you have a darker skin tone, you really want to be careful not to over irritate the skin. And that can happen if you're too aggressive about your exfoliation. So you can exfoliate, that's going to help that dead skin. And the dead skin is what is really holding the pigment. It's going to help that kind of slough off, and it's going to let the new skin that doesn't have chance to actually overproduce melanin shine through. So exfoliation is a good way to do it. Also using things that are tyrosinase inhibitors. Those are like your azelaic acid, your kojic acid, your licorice root, your alpha-arbutin. Those kinds of ingredients work very well at home. Even niacinamide's a very good one to fight with hyperpigmentation.
How about vitamin C's for dark skin tones?
Vitamin C is a fantastic way to brighten the skin in general. Just want to be careful because vitamin C is very finicky. It does not play well with others. So if you're going to use vitamin C, you want to actually separate it from your other actives.
When you're saying gentle exfoliation, so you're saying not the harsh physical scrubs, for instance, and then maybe even some of the chemical exfoliators?
Yeah, so a lot of the chemical exfoliators on the market are not made for those with darker skin tone. That's just not who they formulated those products for. So you want to make sure that you're being careful about the actual percentage that you're using. For example, I don't like to tell anyone with a darker skin tone to use glycolic acid over 5% because it can actually irritate the skin by causing what's called little hot spots. It'll fly through the skin and can cause more hyperpigmentation to occur.
And that's because glycolic acid has a smaller molecule too, right? So it goes deeper?
It's very small, and so it can go deep and it goes fast, and that can actually lead to irritation. Irritation leads to hyperpigmentation. You can choose something like lactic acid, mandelic acid, because those are much larger molecules.
And then as far as physical scrubs, those are just no, right? Just no chance at all.
Yeah, honestly, there's a lot of irritation that can occur with physical scrubs. And so I would say if you are suffering with hyperpigmentation and you have a darker skin tone, just skip it. It's not worth the risk. The truth is that the very best tools you have are your fingers. And especially if you're fighting hyperpigmentation, you don't want to over-irritate the skin.
So one of the most common things I see is people message me and they say that they've been using all of these active ingredients, but their hyperpigmentation just doesn't seem to go away, or sometimes it's even worse. Would that be then the next step is to go see a professional like you, a dermatologist?
Yeah, definitely. So if you've tried some of these over-the-counter products and you're not seeing results, you always want to treat hyperpigmentation sooner rather than later, because once it really moves down into the dermis, it can be really difficult to get to, and you just need procedures at that point.
What would be some of those procedures that are safe for people with dark skin tones?
So there are a ton of different in-office procedures that can be done. I usually will do a combination of different in-office procedures because melanogenesis, or the pigment producing pathway, can be quite complicated. So you want to attack it from multiple different angles. You can do that with something like a chemical peel, but a gentle chemical peel. You want to make sure that you're not using the wrong chemical peel that's going to make things worsen. I tend to use chemical peels that have a good mandelic acid base, simply because that's a very large molecule that does not cause hot spots or irritation throughout the skin. You don't want to just slop off the old pigment. You also have got to stop the overproduction of new pigment that's coming. So you want to use tyrosinase inhibitors. I actually do this very strategically. I use a little device that has different tyrosinase inhibitors in there, and I will use it as a mesotherapy or a meso infusion of those tyrosinase inhibitors directly into the skin, depending on where the pigment is. So I use a wood lamp, find out if it is epidermal or dermal, and then I will use the appropriate device length and actually put the different tyrosinase inhibitors where they need to be within the skin. So it's usually a combination of different procedures, but that's tend to be my go-to. So a good chemical peel mixed with a good meso infusion process yields absolutely amazing results, but everyone does not need to do treatments. If your pigment is superficial enough, you can actually get a prescription strength cream that will help to knock that out.
Are there specific peels that they should look for or lasers?
So with lasers, you have to be super duper careful. A laser can actually really mess you up if it is the wrong laser. Even if it's the right laser at the wrong settings or the wrong provider behind the instrument, you can end up with worsening pigmentation. I have seen this time and time again, which is almost why I caution against lasers if you're not sure, if you don't have a good relationship with the provider, if you've not seen a lot of before and afters in someone who is your skin type or your skin tone. But there are lasers that successfully treat melasma. Specifically, there's one called Aerolase, which is a fantastic instrument. It is very good at treating melasma, and there are a lot of providers that do offer the Aerolase Laser, so it's something that I would look up online. You can actually go to Aerolase website, and they will list out the different providers that have that laser.
So what would be, some of the things that people should look for when they are, trying to find a dermatologist?
As far as dermatologists, 3% of dermatologists are African American and 4% are Latino. There are just not a lot of minority dermatology physicians, so I understand the struggle there, but there are resources that can undoubtedly help you to find the right provider. There's a website called Skin of Color, or SOCS, and that is a Skin of Color society that will list out other minority physicians that can help you find the right provider for you. And remember, you don't have to go to someone who looks like me or who mimics your skin tone to know how to treat your skin tone. You just want to have a comfortable conversation with them. Make sure that they've treated someone who looks like you multiple times. Ask for good before and after pictures. And if this conversation feels uncomfortable, if there seems to be a little bit of tension there, that's probably not the right provider for you. It is your face. We only get one. So I would just respectfully decline their service and go to someone that you feel comfortable with.
And I guess the last question would be, are there any specific products that you recommend to your patients to treat hyperpigmentation or even to, prevent it?
Yes, so in treating hyperpigmentation, the number one place that you need to start is with a good sunscreen. Sunscreen is your very first line of defense. It stops the UV rays from penetrating your skin, causing the irritation, causing the inflammation, causing the hyperpigmentation. So I don't want to get into any products before we talk about the sunscreen, because it's truly that important. And the sunscreen that you're using when fighting hyperpigmentation truly matters. You want to make sure that you are using a sunscreen that is a mineral or a physical sunscreen and not necessarily a chemical sunscreen. This can be a little bit tricky for those with dark skin because traditionally mineral sunscreens leave you with that white cast that is not so desirable, but you can find mineral sunscreens. I'm actually wearing one right now that does not leave you with a white cast. It just takes a little bit of digging, a little bit of research, but it's really important to use a mineral or physical sunscreen because that's literally a shield being put on your skin to block the sun rays from hitting the skin, whereas a chemical sunscreen actually has to absorb some of those UV rays before it can bounce them back out. In the absorption process, heating happens, and remember, heat is not our friend. Heat can lead to inflammation, which can lead to pigmentation, not worth the risk. So I'm gonna get off my high horse with the sunscreen, but it's so important that you start with that. Another thing, if you're truly suffering from this, if this is a difficult condition for you, I would say that you can do something like Heliocare or the Isdin Sun Capsules. These are actually tablets that you can take by mouth, and they will help to protect you from the sun. They do not take the place of your sunscreen, but they are additional sunscreen boosters. So basically it's an internal sunscreen, and you would take it 30 minutes before going out in the sun to provide you with extra additional bonus of sun protection. So this is for someone who is truly over the pigmentation and wanting to do as much as they physically can. So those are your preventers. And then when we get into products that I really love right now, it is Cyspera. Cyspera is one of my number one recommendations for treating hyperpigmentation. Cyspera is the brand name, but it is actually cysteamine. This is a cream or a mask that you put on every day until you're happy with where your pigmentation is. And it is a powerful antioxidant that fights melanogenesis, or that pigment producing pathway, at multiple levels. It's not just a tyrosinase inhibitor. Yes, tyrosinase inhibitors are important, but there are so many other pathways that actually lead to melanin and pigment production. Cyspera can knock out the great majority of those. So it's been my #1 recommendation for people right now because the results from that have been phenomenal.
Ooh, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to learn more about that.
Seriously, an amazing, amazing new antioxidant that we have.
Well, thank you so much. Dr. Stephens, you are on social media, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of my social media channels, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, are Dr. Alexis Stephens. I give lots of useful skin tips and tricks, and I would love to have you guys join me over there.
I will leave all of her information down below in the description box. You can find me on Instagram too. I'm at Susan Yara, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.